No mai, haere mai ki te tēnei hui. Kia ora koutou, ko Jennifer Lay aho. Um, uh, ko kaimahi aho ki Ace Aotearoa, ko Ako Aotearoa. Warm welcome to you today from a very warm day in Ōtautahi, 19 degrees. Can you believe that? We've had some beautiful weather there. So it's great to have you here today. Thank you, all of you who are here. And I like to offer a whakatauki to start. And so our whakatauki this morning is Whaia te iti kahurangi, strive for excellence. And I chose that one not because I'm a big fan of excellence all the time. Well, I strive for excellence, but it's trying to strive for people to be their best, I think, rather than excellence. But it's I thought a really good proverb to think about the session today, which is based on the adult community education learning standards, the ACE teaching standards, beg your pardon. And the title for today is Experiential Insight, a collaborative approach to assessing progress and learning needs. So it's an exploration in a very short amount of time, looking at assessment. Here's just a little bit about me, in that I've been working in the tertiary education sector for a long time, over 30 years. Importantly, I learnt a lot about teaching adults from teaching the women and men in the men's and women's prison and here in Ōtautahi. From there, I also was driven to study. So I've done 2 masters in understanding adult learning and adult teaching, and also taught at the University of Canterbury in Ara, and currently do some work for Ako Aotearoa, the Centre for Tertiary Teaching Excellence, as well, and importantly today, for Ace Aotearoa. So I am still learning, importantly. There's lots that I want to explore and keep learning about the work that I do, but I do love teaching and have had the privilege of teaching for a long time with lots of different groups and facilitating lots of groups in the community as well as institutions. So that's enough about me. Let's have a look at what we're looking at. So this is our kaupapa for today. It's a photo of actually Whakatū that I visited recently. I was born in Whakatū in Nelson. So this is what we'll look at. We're looking at assessment. We're looking at some questions to use, looking at the techniques that we can use with assessment, and then importantly, a chance for you to share your experience. That, as many of you are familiar with, at the end, I'll also give you an opportunity to talk about so what. So what has the session meant? What might you do that's perhaps a little bit different in your practice as a result of looking at the slides, thinking about what I'm talking about, and hearing from other people? So as we know, there's lots to learn and talk about, but I try to keep these sessions based on the standards according to the ACE teaching standards. So these are the particular parts that I'm going to look at today, are 4.1 and 4.2. So these are known as indicators, and if any of you want to look up the ACE teaching standards, you can do on the ACE website. They give us as tutors, as facilitators, a guide about how to be the best we can be. So there, as I said, 19, well, I didn't say, but there are 19 indicators, and these sessions unpack those indicators as best as possible. So we're looking at 4.2, so learning experiences, and we're looking at 4.1 today, their experiences, and analyse with the learners their experience to identify progress. So in a sense, it's really focusing on assessment, and next time I'll focus more on feedback. Okay, let's get going with having a look at what that really means. So first of all, we're going to really look at what do we mean by assessment, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the term of assessment, what it means. So when we assess our learners, we're looking to collect evidence to really get a sense of their performance. How well are they doing? How well are they learning? And whatever assessment technique we use, we're really hoping that it'll measure what it's supposed to measure. So they're the two key components. Without going into huge detail about the intricacies of assessment today, that's a sense what this session is based on. And whenever I'm teaching learners, and as I said to you, I've taught them in prisons, in the community, in the university and Polytech. Whenever I'm teaching, these are some questions that I find useful for thinking about when I teach. So, of course, I'm spending a lot of time planning the session and thinking about the activities and the content that I need to teach. But importantly, these are the questions that I ask myself. Um, so to try and get a sense of whether the learners are learning as I wanted them to learn. So what are the skills and knowledge I'm trying to teach? So being very clear in my learning outcomes, what it is that I want the learners to walk out of the room knowing. Second question, how can I find out whether learners are learning what I intended them to learn? So what method of assessment will I use to try and find out that actually they are learning what I intended them to learn? Third question, how can I then help learners learn better? What do I put in place so that they will learn better? Are there techniques that I need to use? Are there different strategies? Is there extra information that I need to give them? Are there extra ways to assist with their learning, to support them to learn as best as possible? And then the final question there, are my learners learning what I think I'm teaching? And I've probably alluded to that already. It's about just making sure that what are the learning outcomes that I set at the outset, the learners are in fact learning. So there are some questions that I ask myself. And then these rather are some ways that I may assess the learning. And perhaps for many of you, these aren't new, but for some of you, it may be a reminder of different ways of assessing learning. So I think traditionally we might have only seen assessment as one way of collecting evidence, and that is perhaps more of a summative way in the form of a test or an exam. And certainly in the formal sector of tertiary education, in the university sector, beg your pardon, of tertiary education, that's often a common way of collecting evidence to know whether people have established the performance, they've met the requirements. We are fortunate in the ACE sector in that we have a variety of techniques that we can use, and these are just some of them. So for assessing whether learners have learned what I hoped they have learned, I can observe what they're doing and try and get a sense that yes, they're on track and yes, they're following what it is they need to do. I can also use the technique of questioning them. If I'm not sure, I can question perhaps if they're doing group work. Equally, I could question them afterwards individually to get a sense of whether they've learned what it is that I wanted them to learn, so that I know that I'm collecting some evidence that each learner has learned the work that I've been working with them on. Equally, there's feedback. I may ask for that from the point of view of I often commonly use post-it notes. That can be a helpful way and an easy way for learners to give direct feedback about something perhaps that they're still not sure of, or something that they might want to spend extra time on, or any questions that they may have. Then there is self-assessment. So that may be a technique that I will use from time to time, similar to peer assessment, whereby I might invite the learner themselves to do an assessment. That could be in the form of a quiz. It could be a Kahoot using technology. It could be a peer assessment as well, whereby people are divided into pairs and have to complete tasks, and therefore I can see they've completed the learning, or they work on a more formal structure of a quiz or a questionnaire. So there are some of the ways that I work with learners. And shortly, I'll be interested in hearing from you about what sort of things you use for assessment with your learners as well. So I'll invite you to share that shortly, but just for now, um, I'm going to just give you a few more ideas around assessment. These are some other techniques that can be used for assessing knowledge and skills. As I mentioned before, quizzes are really popular. So it could be a true-false quiz, could be a multi-choice quiz, could be an old-fashioned as in doesn't need to use technology quiz, as in just using the whiteboard kind of quiz, dividing people into teams perhaps. And it could be using technology. So I'm familiar with some technology like Kahoot, where I could design a quiz and give that to my learners and therefore assess their knowledge and skills. Then there is the more traditional test, and I'm sure I don't need to explain that, but for many learners that can be problematic. That's why it's good, I think, to have a range of tools to use with assessment, because traditionally tests have been used and can put people off learning if they get negative results, or any kind of the results rather. Assignments are similar too. Sometimes assignments are equated with learning that can be problematic for some people. But again, this can be a way that we can assess our learners and find out what they know. Um, Projects and portfolios, they can be perhaps different techniques again that you could use that can be take longer. But oftentimes, I know learners really enjoy investing time and energy into projects and portfolios. And perhaps I'm talking more about sort of some creative classes like photography, art, etc., um, more craft courses. They may collect portfolios, evidence of their learning. And so that can be a good way to assess perhaps something that they did on the first day compared with something that they might have done on the last day. So you do get a sense of their level of performance of a learner, how much you can see they've developed. Then presentations, again, this may be something that you could incorporate into the assessment of your project. Some of you will be familiar with the fact that when we teach others, we're more likely to remember what we've taught. From the point of view of retention. So that could be a technique, and that's certainly something that I try to do, is to encourage learners to learn about something and then present it or teach to other people. And that way, that can be an assessment again, a different technique for people to use and feel involved, and obviously can retain the learning from doing that, from teaching others, from presenting. Demonstrations, again, and particularly people who are working in areas of industry and where it's easier to teach a demonstration of how to make pancakes or how to change a tire or fix a window. All of those things are much easier to do from a demonstration point of view. Equally, simulations, perhaps people who are learning skills around care of the elderly, they may want to act out how to do that. Case studies too, again, that's really useful to use. And I know many of you will be using these techniques, but I look forward to hearing how and which ones you use. But case studies can be great because you can actually personalize them and make them local. And particularly if you have key areas in your community or people in your community, you can make case studies about them. And I do quite enjoy that case study technique, and particularly when it's personal for the learner. So maybe people are learning about tikanga Māori, so they want to, or te ao Māori, beg your pardon, the world of Māori, they may want to learn about tikanga, so I may give them a case study of something that's local in, say, Kaitahu region, as opposed to something that happens in Northland. So case studies can be really personal for that reason. Then we move to techniques, and techniques, finally, the last technique, beg your pardon, is feedback. And feedback again is something that I'm sure many of you are working with, and that could be something that I give more formally in a written feedback format, or it could be something that I offer verbally to the person. But at least they get some feedback so they can continue to learn and know that assessment of their knowledge and skills has been done, and they get a sense of how well they're doing. So I have the help of Ty, who's going to put people in to breakout rooms now, and you'll have a chance to talk about how you assess and what do you do. So that will happen shortly. You'll see on the screen opportunity to join a breakout room and talk about who you are and how you use assessment. I'd be interested in hearing from you in the chat. Some of you feel free can write some things in the chat there. I know I've still got a question to answer, Debbie, which I'll come back to shortly. But please feel free, any of you, to write something in the chat. We're going to go into breakout rooms again soon. And after that, I would like you to feedback verbally. But please, if you shared some things or heard some things, please write some messages in the chat there. So people talked about role plays. That's lovely. It's great to hear people doing role plays, because people often say, don't do a role play. I don't want to do a role play. So thank you. Thanks, Judith, for that. Tuiara, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed that. And audio-visual presentations, thanks to Judith. Anything else you heard about or other people shared? It's always good to get some different ideas. So feel free to keep adding in there. Okay, we'll keep moving on. And as I said, we'll have a chance for breakout rooms again before the end. So here's some more ideas just popped up. Realia. Is that how you say that, realia? Yes, actual visits to places and contexts. Yeah, I love that. Great. I haven't heard that term, Judith. Thank you. Caroline, using AI. Oh, wow. Good on you, Caroline, to capture conversations for verbal assessment. And actually, let's turn to you, Caroline. Now you've said that, because I'd love to hear more. So, Caroline, do you feel like sharing with everyone? Are you okay about that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thanks.
Kia ora, it's Carolyn from Primary ITO. So we've actually been running a pilot, which is just actually on hold at the moment, using AI to capture assessment, what we call assessment by conversation.
Yeah.
So just explaining to my group that we've used a couple of apps, one being Otter AI and the other one was Glean, to assess so it's summative assessment in the workplace. So we're involved in work-based learning. So I was saying a couple of things that are really good about AI for us is that it has the ability to cut out background noise.
Right.
And obviously for us being in the primary industry sector, there is often quite a lot of background noise. For example, we used it with an arborist who was using a chipper. So, very noisy.
Yes.
So what I was explaining to my group, what we did is we rewrote our assessments in the form of a conversation script,
Right.
based closely on the unit standard, so that we were ensuring we were covering off everything we needed to for them to meet the requirements of that unit standard, and also to ensure consistency across the country and across, depending on who the assessor was, that they were actually asking the same questions to the learner. And we've found, I guess, the issues we've kind of stumbled across being a pilot. That's what it's all about, right? Finding out why it doesn't work. Is that the transcripts are not necessarily that accurate. They're getting better all the time, and that is what they say about AI, is that, the AI you use today is only as good as it is today. It'll be better tomorrow, because that's what happens with these large language models, is that the more people are inputting into them, the better they get. We've found it been a really interesting process. We've also had the actual recording of the conversation, the speaking, but also the transcript. So we've sort of got to a point, like I say, where we've just sort of put it on hold for a number of reasons. Some also, we've got some concerns or some things we need to kind of iron out around privacy as well. Obviously, we do check in with the learner thoroughly before we record them, etc. But yeah,
Sure.
it's sort of where we're at.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing that, Caroline.
Hey,
Really
no worries.
appreciate that. It's great to hear. Cool. Thank you. Let's have a look at Marie. You've asked the students. I'd like to hear a bit more about that too, Marie. Are you able to share what you mean by I can now do?
I like to try and empower my students, and
Yes.
I think many tutors would agree, or teachers, that saying a test is frightening for
Yes.
students. When evaluating, I put up on the board, I can now, on the whiteboard,
Yeah.
and I give them time to think about what they are able to do. Oh, I can now do a budget or whatever it
Right.
may be.
Yeah.
And that's their moment, I hope, that
Yes.
they can realise that they have learned whatever it might be we're learning at that time.
Yes.
And when I've taught something, I like to sit down with my students and try and get someone else to demonstrate on the board what we've been doing, which not only
Excellent.
shows learning, but it also empowers the student to be able to get up and demonstrate or talk in front of
Yes.
others.
Yeah.
And someone in our group said, what was easy in the class and why, and
Yes.
what was hard in the class and why.
Nice.
I
Great.
apologise to the interpreter. I'm a fast talker. Sorry.
No, well, it's in the chat too, which I really appreciate, Marie. I thank you so much for sharing I can now do, and I really like those two other powerful questions. What is easy and why, and what was hard and why? It's great. Okay, so we've got some really good ideas there from AI to those other ideas. Actually, I'll go back to you, Judith, and see if you can just tell me a bit about realia, because I kind of know what you mean, but I wonder if you can tell me a story about it, how you use that. Are you able to share with us, Judith, please?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
So of course, realia, we know that, it comes from the word real. So which means that, for example, the actual topic is grocery, or at the grocery or at the supermarket.
Yeah,
So I start with, the kinds of terms, the phrases, and the identifying the actual fruit and vegetables, for example, especially if the learners are on the lower level
yes,
of English acquisition. So, which means that, I start with the pictures, etc., the graphics, digital or physical, that's realia, the physical one. For
yeah,
example, it's about terms on fruit and vegetables. So if I can bring something like actual cabbage, actual,
yes, yes,
yeah. So after that, so to be able to strengthen their skills, I will have an OTC, meaning to say education outside the classroom.
right,
So because we have been talking about terms, phrases, how to buy or how to, or how to pay at the teller or
yeah.
at the till. So what we do is go to the supermarket,
Ah,
actual pack and save, for example, not promoting the brand though, okay.
no.
And then they will see the actual sections, where the deli is, what they can find at the deli,
Right, right,
what they can find at the beverage section, etc. So
yeah,
that means what they were able to study about the terms, phrases, expressions,
yes.
etc. Yeah, become more real.
Indeed, more
Yes,
real, more
yes.
powerful learning. Thank
Yeah,
you for telling us
yeah,
the context of that,
yeah.
Judith. I really
Okay.
appreciate it. That's some great different stories of what you do and how you assess. One more there, Kate. Thank you for putting that up there about learning using learner agency with goal setting. And Kay, beg your pardon, not Kate. Kay,
That's
are
fine.
you happy to share a little about what you mean or what that means to you, please?
Okay. So our coaches work one-on-one with students rather than a classroom or a small group.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
so we are launching a goal setting website that we've set up now.
yeah,
And this takes the coaches and the students working together to create that learner agency. The learner is saying, okay, I want to be able to learn how to do this.
yes,
And then setting a goal. So it's no good saying I want to learn to read or I want to learn to write. We know that.
Yeah.
So why do you want to read? How do you want to read? And then breaking it down into the smaller parts. So you've got your main goal, and then you've got a selection of smaller goals to actually reach that goal.
Yeah.
And then having those regular, because it's set up in a website, it's constant. And then having those regular times where the coach will take 5 minutes at the start of a lesson, say, let's go back and look at these, and talking and having those discussions with the student and saying, okay, how do you think you're going with these?
Yes. Yeah.
And
right.
Is there something else that we need to be doing? So you're giving the learner ownership of their learning, but they're also seeing that progression themselves, which they may not see outside of that until they sit down and have that discussion. So that's what we're setting up and sending out now, so that the learners have ownership and agency over their learning, and our coaches can see and plan accordingly.
Great. I like that. Thank you so much, Kay. Well, can you just explain who RYALT are again, please?
Okay, we are the Rural Youth and Adult Literacy Trust.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, I have heard of you. So lovely stories about what you're doing as far as assessment's concerned in quite a few different contexts. And I'm sure there's many more that I'd love to hear from if we had more time. Let's just move on to looking now at the next slide. So our next slide is a graphic. As you can see, I've taken this one, but I liked the images here. The only thing is it does have spelling mistakes. I'm sorry about that. But it talks about formative assessments. So these are assessments that can occur, as many of you will know, throughout the learning journey, rather than a summative assessment that happens just at the end. So it's just reinforcing again some of the ideas that I was talking about earlier, and some that you will have heard about in your groups, about different ways of gathering information to help you get a sense of how well the learner is learning. And I know I've just used these terms, but these are the types of assessment. So we have the idea of the formative assessment and the summative. And I'm pretty sure many of you are already familiar with these kinds of terms, and that back in the day, there used to only really be the term a summative assessment, whereby people were officially measured about their performance, and their grade was measured in an exam usually, or a test. Fortunately, now we have more opportunities to look at the performance of the learner, how well they're going throughout the course, and that helps then inform how you teach, because if you get a sense of learners working well, you keep doing the same. If they're not, you might want to then look at thinking and considering other ways so they are learning. And it might be a good opportunity just to answer the question that Debbie asked earlier. She was just asking about the idea of assessment. Is feedback as an assessment tool from the teacher or the learner? And I think, Debbie, from my point of view, it can be both. Certainly the teacher will use feedback and invite feedback, but equally the learner too can be asking for feedback on their learning. In the break, I just chatted with Ty, and he reminded me very clearly that it's about the principle of ako, isn't it? About that's AKO, so that's about us learning together and learning from each other. So I learn just as much from you as you learn from me. Okay, thanks for that question, Debbie. Let's just carry on to our next slide. Our next slide just talks about self-assessment and the opportunities here for you with providing ways for learners to find out their goals, perhaps a little bit similar to the story we just heard about before, how you can find a tool or a questionnaire to give people. They can then assess whether they're keeping to their goals, and then reset their goals with new objectives and self-assess as they go. So let's just move to our final exercise for today. And shortly, I'm going to give you 8 questions, not all at once. I'm going to divide the questions into your breakout rooms. So when I mention your name, please write down your question or photograph it. And when you get back into your breakout rooms, could you discuss how you might use this question with your learners. Okay, that's your task, how you might use this question with your learners. Do you like it as a question, as a good perhaps question as well? Do you like it? Could you use it? So the questions have all been taken from one of the guides I've used to prepare for this session, and that's one of the ACO resources, Collecting Evidence of Learner Benefit. The references in the reference list. So here's the first two questions. What have you learned from your recent projects? What challenges did you face and how did you overcome them? So then we move to question 3, how do I know that what I'm doing is working and making a difference to my learners' learning? Then we move to question 4, how much do my learners know? How do I assess the progress of my learners? How do I know my learners have fulfilled the requirements? And then we come to the last 2 questions, discuss those. One question, or if you have more time, you can look at other questions as well. They're right at the start of the chat, all of the questions. Welcome back again, everyone. And it was good to be able to pop into some rooms and to hear some of the questions that you were discussing. So thank you for that. I'd be really keen to hear from some of you now about those questions and how they worked. I know we don't have as much time as would be good, but it would be great if any of you were able to just write in the chat there anything about those questions or comment. Anyone feel like able to comment right now, please? That would be wonderful. Anyone able to do that?
We looked at the question number 1, and it was a wee bit difficult for us because Teresa and I aren't currently teaching.
Right.
And that was about a recent project. And it was also a little bit ambiguous about whether it was a learner project or what sort of project it was.
Okay.
So we looked at the second question, the challenges you face. And I think Teresa came up with something that was really important with feedback, and that was that it needs to be timely, and that if you give instant feedback, it's much more valuable to the learner.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Teresa, for that. Yeah, I appreciate that perhaps, not all questions were going to work, were they, for your context? But great, you could look at the other one. And those 8 questions will be there in the slides that you'll be sent out. And, of course, in the chat at the start. I know it's probably a bit difficult to access now. But thank you for working today together, and thank you for considering these ideas around assessment. I know there's lots more, and I'll be able to talk about some of those next time. But we are at our end of our session today, and I just want to thank you all for thinking about the questions that I've offered you, having the chance with talking with each other, but importantly thinking about, so what has this meant to you? What will you do as a result of today? Is there anything you'll change? Is there anything you'll add? Have a think about that now. And I know it's always tricky because we've got other things to go on to, no doubt, meetings or other sessions or even lunch if you're lucky. But just take a moment and think to yourself, so from this session on assessment, when we looked at the whole concept of collecting evidence, so we know that the learner is learning, and we know, and we want to check in all the time, is the learner learning the outcomes that I set at the start of the session? So what is something you might do that's a bit different? You learned some ideas about use of AI today, about realia, about different techniques. Maybe you were reminded of some. So just think for yourself. And again, I welcome those of you who feel like sharing in the chat what you might do that's different. So rather than hold you up, I will carry on, but I do encourage you to think about what you'll do and I know many of you make notes, but maybe make it a post-it for yourself to remind you of that one thing that you'll do that's different. So I'll close with a karakia whakamutunga, and it's thanking you all for being here, but acknowledging that we've finished this session now. Kua mutu a mātou mahi, mō tēnei wā, manakitia mai mātou katoa. O mātou hoa, o mātou whānau, au ki te orangi. Peace to all of you.